Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this video, I've got a really good question, and I just had to do a video about it. It's from Fishboy68, I think is his handle, and he asks about wind-blown banks during the wintertime. So, like, you know, water temperatures in the 40s type deal. And this is actually a topic that I feel like we've been misled a lot. I think that there have been some general statements about wind and how good it is for fishing over the years, and I don't think that we've really explored some of the arguments that could go against wind-blown banks, because it seems like we always have been taught to look for those wind-blown banks, where where the ecosystem's kind of just getting churned up. Maybe there's some current, and I have definitely found some instances throughout the years where that is not necessarily the case, that wind actually will shut off a bite. So I wanted to talk about that right now and kind of, talk about when wind is a really good ingredient in your fishing and when it can completely shut down a bite. And this is just from my experiences over the years. So before we get into the bulk of this topic, first off, I just want to say thank you to you guys for continuing to support the channel and to, just support me in general, providing this content. So if you like this content, make sure you hit that subscribe button and consider liking, sharing as well, and commenting. Commenting is a great way to support this channel. And also check out the merchandise that I have in my SonarFishing store. All right, so let's talk about wind and how it affects fishing. So we've been taught over the years that wind is a really good ingredient for most situations where it creates some current, it churns things up, it activates the ecosystem, and the bass generally let their guard down a little bit and makes fishing easier. And by and large, that is true. There are a ton of different situations where wind is definitely a big aid in catching more fish. I would say that during the warmer months, that's the case. In situations where you have very stable weather or where the air temperatures are similar to the water temperatures, those sort of things, wind is definitely, a helpful ingredient. However, I'm going to throw some scenarios at you that I think it's very, very important to remember, for the future, because this may help you choose better areas. All right, so a scenario that I don't necessarily like to have wind definitely has to be during the spring. Okay, so like especially pre-spawn and when those fish are beginning to think about moving up to spawn, wind is the last thing that I want, because generally when you get a windy day, it's not a warm windy day usually. You can have those, but usually it's cold wind that you're dealing with. And that's the last thing you want, because that is that time period where those fish are looking for the water temps to warm up, and that's going to bring them to be more active and move around and things like that in the shallows. So I absolutely avoid the wind completely. So I'm always looking for the banks that are not getting affected by the wind, that are protected from the wind. So usually that means like the northern shoreline on a body of water during that time of year, because usually those cold fronts are coming from the north. And so I'll always keep an eye on where the wind is affecting a lake and where it's pushing that cold water, because that's exactly what's happening. Is that you got to remember that the fastest way to cool down a lake is with cold wind, because it churns that water and quickly, starts dropping that temperature. It doesn't have that insulation quality like it would have when it's, just a calm, sunny day and you don't have a wisp of wind. It could be super cold, but if there's no wind to kind of churn that water, it's not going to drop the water temp all that fast. So that is something that during the spring, man, I'm constantly thinking about it, especially when I go down to Florida. And I've actually discovered, I'm not a big app guy. Like I don't have a lot of like fishing apps other than, you know, the Navionics app. But there's one app that I've recently discovered called the Deep Dive app. And this one has some really cool layers to it. But one of the layers that I'm really excited about is the wind intensity layer. I don't know if that's exactly what it's called, but it's a layer on this app that allows you to see how what banks, what areas are getting hit by the wind predominantly, and what intensity of wind they're getting hit by. And that is a big help, because whether you want to avoid those areas or you want to go to those areas, you know, having that type of capability to immediately pick out where the wind is hitting, you know, certain pockets, certain points, and things like that. That is a huge benefit. So the Deep Dive app, I've got to give a shout out to, because that app really has some cool stuff in it that's not just frivolous and, you know, just gimmicky. You know, it's not snake oil. It's actually really cool. They've even got a water clarity, you know, layer that gives you up-to-date water clarity on their you know, satellite imagery. So really cool app. I would say that you guys got to definitely go check that one out if you're interested in like that wind layer especially. But that's kind of like what I'm getting at here is like when the wind is very, very cold during those times of the year where the fish like it warmer, that's when wind can actually be a deterrent for the fish and something that you want to avoid completely. So the spring is really where it's at for me when it comes to the wind. That's the one time of the year that I'm constantly paying attention to wind direction and the water or the air temperature when it's windy, because that can destroy a bite, can destroy an entire area during the spring. And especially when I go down to Florida, like we've got Okeechobee coming up. That's one of the main things that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is the wind direction and the air temperature when it's windy, because I want to avoid those areas of the lake that are just getting pummeled by cold wind. So some other situations you might want to avoid the wind completely, and when it will totally demolish a bite, is when you're fishing topwater. A lot of topwaters, you want pretty calm conditions. Now, there are some topwaters like chugger style baits or like, you know, walking baits in general, like Zero Spooks. Like those are well known for being able to fish them, you know, in some pretty decent sized waves and still get bites. They create so much commotion that they still will work in the wind like that. But like things like poppers or, you know, prop baits or frogs or you know, buzz baits, like those things, those baits tend to be way better when it's calmer. And I can tell you one thing, when I'm dealing with like grass fishing in particular, when I'm talking about grass, I'm talking about more emergent grass. So like grass that's above the water, lily pads, Kissimmee grass, reeds, and things like that. Wind is like the kiss of death for fishing that type of cover. Generally, you can get away with it with submerged grass for some reason, but emergent grass, like that's like, you know, that'll completely shut the bite down, especially if you're fishing topwater throughout that type of cover. And also matted grass. So like, you see me do this movement right here. So like at Guntersville, for instance, when you're fishing a frog over that matted grass, if you have any of this wave movement in those mats, you might as well just move on to another spot, because that's like 90% of the time that's going to completely kill the bite. I'm not even going to get a bite. So like if I'm mat fishing, you know, that kind of movement from a wind, you know, in the waves is no good. So those things, those are some scenarios that stand out to me over the years where wind is just an absolute you know, destroyer of a bite. And but other than that, you know, wind, and now that we've kind of talked about the negative with wind is still a major aid to a bite in a lot of different situations. Like I said, during the summertime, I always look for windblown banks. When it's generally a warm wind, I'll definitely be looking for those windblown banks, where the water is actually warming up because of the wind. And when I'm looking for those like mud lines, where the wind is actually kicking up a bunch of mud on the shoreline and creating like this like muddy, transition line, that's also going to be a good situation. And in clear water in general, wind can really lower those fish's guard and allow you to do some things that you couldn't do. Some baits that are a little bit more for more reaction style situations. Wind can really help you get fish in the boat that you normally wouldn't, because when it's calm and it's clear, those fish are a little bit more picky, I guess you'd say. So but anyways, I thought that was a great question and something I feel very strongly about, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about the negative side of wind. Everybody's always just looking for windblown banks. And playing the wind, and that's a good thing, but not always. And so there are scenarios that I think it can definitely be something you want to run away from. So anyways, thank you for the question. Fishboy68, I think was the handle. Awesome question. And other than that, if any of you have any questions, drop a comment below. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and I'm going to see you out on the water. Trust the process.